Oh, you look so mellow. Are you a good boy? He's purring away. I wonder if you can hear the purring. Probably not, but he's purring. Believe you me. Hi. Hi, my name's Mark and welcome to the channel. Today we're talking all about how to travel as a crafter, specifically when you fly. If you're curious about what you can and can't take with you on an airplane for your next trip, stick around. Let's get into it. If you're new to the channel, you may not know that I fly pretty often for work. I work as a professional musician, a singer, and sometimes a pianist, and a lot of my work takes me around the country and sometimes around the world. So during my performance season, roughly September through April, I'm traveling at least once, twice, sometimes 3 times each month. And each time I'm traveling, I'm usually taking multiple legs of flights to get from my home city of Cleveland, Ohio, to whatever my destination is. So how do I pack the things that I want to work on, my projects, my tools, and what am I allowed to bring onto flights? All right, I've got my computer in front of me and we're going to be looking at the TSA website for their official guidelines of what you can and can't bring both on an airplane and in your checked baggage. So if you're not familiar, the TSA is the Transportation Security Administration, and this is the agency that monitors what we can bring on flights in the United States. So if you are watching me from another country, I'm sorry that these rules aren't exactly specific to what you would be able to take on your flights, but you can look up your airline, you can look up whatever agency you're traveling through, and hopefully find similar guidelines to know what is and isn't allowed to be brought along for your trip. So here on this page, what can I bring? It's really helpful that TSA has all sorts of categories on their website for frequently asked questions, everything from household goods, tools, medical supplies, and things like knitting needles, scissors, crochet hooks. So I'm currently under the Sharp Objects tab, and really important to note here, they say this on every page, the final decision rests with the TSA officer on whether an item is allowed through the checkpoint. So regardless of the rules here, regardless of what you've been told before and what you've been allowed to use before, in the moment when you're going through your security checkpoint, an officer could decide that for whatever reason, something is not allowed to go through with you. And in that moment, that really sucks. You can't do much about it. You can't really start a fight. You can't just grab your stuff and run through. I mean, if someone says a firm no, you can't have this, then unfortunately you're stuck without it. So in this video, we're going to talk about the guidelines that do exist, and then we're going to talk about specifically how to pack these tools in the best way possible to get them through security safely on your plane, safely to your destination, so that you can keep crafting every moment of your trip. So, Sharp Objects. The list starts with box cutters, which for a carry-on bag, no. For your checked bag, yes. So there are a lot of items that can specifically be carried in your checked bag going under the plane, but there are a lot of items that are cleared for both your checked bag and your carry-on. And this is something that I look for because I want to knit while I'm on my flight. I want to knit while I'm waiting to board my flight. If I get delayed, I really hope I have a project or 2 projects or 3 projects with me to help pass that time. Sometimes I pack things in my checked bag. I'll talk more about what I pack and why I pack it where later in the video. But typically, I want to make sure I have at least 1 or 2 projects in reach in my carry-on baggage. So if I scroll down past some of these items, we get to crochet hooks. And then here we have a nice green check for both carry-on and checked bags. So that's perfect. If you're curious about crochet hooks, They have a blanket, yes, they can go through both in your checked bag and your carry-on luggage. Let's keep scrolling through. Here we are at knitting needles, and yes, we get 2 green checks for carry-on and checked baggage. And let's go to the second page here. Nail clippers. A lot of people talk to me through comments on the videos and in person about how they choose to take nail clippers instead of scissors because they feel like it's less likely to be detected or taken away from them at a security checkpoint. So, not a bad idea. If you feel more comfortable carrying a small pair of nail clippers that you could use to cut thread, cut yarn, trim whatever you need for your project purposes, then yes, they get a check mark to go through both your carry-on and checked baggage. Let's see, safety pins, in case you like to use safety pins as stitch markers. And I'm going to go to the next page. Scissors. So here, for carry-on bags, it has an exclamation point. So it's like, yes, you can take it. No, it's an exclamation point saying there's some sort of special instruction here. So reading that, if packed in the carry-on, your scissors must be less than 4 inches from the pivot point. So we'll talk about that in just a second. For checked bags, yes, you can take full-size scissors, you could take kitchen shears, whatever kind of scissor you need to use. But for your carry-on bag, they're saying yes, as long as the blade part of the scissor is less than 4 inches from the point where it hinges. So I've got a couple of pairs of scissors in front of me, and let's take a look at how long the blades measure. I've got to dig through a little bit of stuff to get to it. Don't mind the computer here. Let's just take a look first. These are my super sharp Madeline Tosh scissors, and the blades are pretty short. So let's look at the pivot point here where the screw is located to the tip. If I put the measure at the end of the tip, it's about 1 1/4 inch to the pivot point. So these scissors are 1 1/4 inch in length, the actual scissor blade part of it. So these are absolutely allowed. I have even smaller scissors that I usually keep in my travel cases. The blades on here, let's see how long they measure. From the pivot point, this measures 1/2 inch. That's crazy. So if you have any sort of small scissors, scissors that come with Notion bundles that you use for your sewing, anything like that, they are allowed. A 4-inch blade on a scissor is actually quite long. Let me measure out 4 inches. So this is a 4-inch measure. That's a blade about that long. That's, a part of my face, or if I hold it up to a cell phone, the blades could be that long. So with the handles, a pair of scissors could be about as big as this cell phone is. That's a large pair of scissors. So if you have craft-specific scissors that are smaller or medium-sized, most likely those are going to be totally approved to go both on the plane and in your checked baggage. Next, we have sewing needles. So if you are someone that likes to sew or embroider or mend, it says yes to both checked baggage and carry-on luggage. Swords. No, you cannot bring your sword on the plane, but you can have it packed in your checked bag. So I think that covers several of the things that I would be curious about as a crafter: crochet hooks, knitting needles, scissors. The other notions that I like to bring are tape measures, stitch markers, and yarn. None of those have any sort of hazard that I can think of, so I'm going to close out of this TSA website, and then we'll talk a little bit more about how to pack things, how to be mindful about the way all of these tools are presented so that you are most likely given the green light to get through security without any fuss. Okay, so now that you know what you can take on your trip with you, it's time to pack it. And at this point, you need to be really careful with your planning to know exactly what supplies you need and how to pack them so that you can A, get through security safely, and B, access everything pretty easily in the airport or on the airplane. So I'm going to walk you through what I do typically when I prepare for a trip. I always take projects with me. There's not a trip in my life that I take where I think I don't need a project. I always want to make sure I have a project. Usually I take 2 projects, sometimes 3, depending on how difficult they are, what challenges they might present, and what kind of trip I'm going on. So in front of me, I have some supplies. This is my starting point for packing for a trip. First, I decide what project to take. Usually I'm taking something that is already in progress. I wouldn't really recommend starting your project, casting on, doing your foundation chain, starting whatever it is, while you're waiting to board the flight or while you're on the plane. There are so many variables, so many distractions that could lead you astray and get you started on the wrong foot. And then you might be thousands of miles in the air with questions, with issues, and you're stuck. And that's the opposite of the reason we want to craft on our trip. We want to craft because it grounds us, it entertains us, it passes the time, and hopefully it brings us a lot of joy. So typically I'm going to bring a project that is already in progress. Now, I don't really want to take something that's almost finished. I usually want to take a project that has plenty of hours ahead. So plenty of hours in its life. I want to take a sweater that maybe has been cast on and is a few inches into the body, but then I know I can knit lots of the body. Then I'll have a little bit of stuff to pay attention to when I need to split for the armholes or work the decreases and seam the shoulders, etc. I might take something that is a really small project, something like a sock, a hat, a stuffed animal, an amigurumi, or a knitted animal, something that I can take easily from place to place. So it depends on what you like to craft and what you want to do. Personally, I'm going to bring a sweater. I might bring 2 sweaters and a smaller project. Some people I know would never bring a sweater with them on a plane. They want to bring socks, maybe a hat, something small and manageable. Either way, you need to sit down and figure out exactly what supplies you'll need from start to finish for the projects you're taking. So in front of me, I have yarn, my crochet hooks, my interchangeable needle set, all of my stitch markers, a couple of options of scissors, and then a tape measure and some barber cord or stitch saver. So this is where I start. I decide what yarn I need, what size hooks and needles, what kind of stitch markers and how many, which pair of scissors I should bring, and then assorted notions. So let's get started. I'm currently working on A Weekender by Andrea Mowry, so let me show you that project and you can see where I am in the process. All right, here's my Weekender, and you can see it's mostly complete. I finished 1 sleeve, the body is all done, and I have my needles currently in the 2nd sleeve. So I've picked up the stitches, I've done 2 or 3 rows of the 2nd sleeve. So this project probably only has 4 or 5 hours of work remaining. So this could be a good choice for my travel day. If I have an hour to sit in the airport once I've gone through security, and then I have anywhere from 2 to 4 hours on my flight, this could be a good choice. I think there's enough knitting time ahead of me that it would entertain me through the whole day, and I could possibly finish the project. Then I have to consider, do I really want to take this project with me, finish it on day 1 of travel, and then just keep it in my suitcase for the rest of the trip? That's up to you. If you have a lot of space in your luggage, then that's no problem. If you don't have a lot of space, if you're going to be traveling around a lot once you're at your destination, you may want something that's not just going to take up space in your backpack, your duffel, or your rolling suitcase. So this is option A. I might be tempted to do something else that has more hours ahead of it so that I could work on it for the duration of my trip and it won't take up quite as much space on the return trip. If I chose to take this project with me, I would need to go through a checklist. So let's use this as an example. I know that right here, I have the needles I need with the correct length cord to work the majority of the sleeve. The only thing I'll need is another set of needles to work the ribbed cuff because I need to go down a needle size. So let me grab them from my bag. I've already got the next size of needles assembled on the cord I need and the correct needle tips. So right here, I now have all of the needles I need to finish the sweater. I also have an almost full skein of yarn. I just joined this to the second sleeve, so I know from experience working the first sleeve, this is more yarn than I need to complete the project. So that's a nice thing to consider. I've got one skein of yarn, it's going to be enough to finish the project, so I'm not going to have other skeins rolling around jumbled up in my suitcase. So what else will I need to finish this project? I like to use scissors. I want to go ahead and weave in my ends when I get to the end of the project. So I'm going to pull one of my small pairs of scissors. I'm going to take these that had the 1/2 inch blade length. And let's see. I talked about weaving in the ends. I will need some sort of darning needle. So my favorite darning needles or tapestry needles are this set from Tulip. They come in a magnetic case. They just latch shut, which I think is nice for travel. They're not going to get lost. They're going to have a spot in a case that secures shut. And it comes with 5 different sizes of tapestry needle, and I also have a few T-pins in here. These are the T-pins I use for changing out my interchangeable needles. They help me lock them in place and then take them apart when needed. So I'm going to bring this whole set. If I was not used to traveling with my notions, if I were going through a different airport, I might be a little bit more conservative and just take one needle with me. I might choose the one I want to take and pack that separately. But like I said, I travel by plane at least a couple of times, if not 3 or 4 times each month. So I'm confident that I'm going to be able to make it through security with all of these tools. I'm going to throw a couple of T-pins back in here, just in case I want to take my needles apart once the project is done. All right, what else might I need? I don't think I need any stitch markers to finish this project out, but I always like to travel with them just in case. Sometimes I use stitch markers to show a certain repeat or technique that happens in my row. For example, a place that I need to decrease, a place that I need to stop and turn my work for short rows. And a big thing I use stitch markers for is to show length. So I might use a locking stitch marker, something like this that opens and closes, to show a certain point on a sleeve, for example, where I need to work a specific measurement. So I might measure the sleeve, get it all laid out flat, and then put in a locking marker at the point where I have worked to show that I need 4 more inches before working my ribbing. And that way, once I'm on a plane, once I'm in a car, on a bus, on a train, somewhere more constricted, I know how far I have to work, and I can measure from a smaller pinpoint versus having to spread the whole sweater out to get a true measurement. So I'm going to pull a few locking stitch markers, and I'm going to grab them in different styles. So I've got 2 light bulb style markers. These are very lightweight, very small. They're not going to be in my way. I'm going to bring a couple of jumbo locking markers, and then I have a smaller plastic locking marker. So because I don't actually need any markers, I think bringing along 5 or 6 markers will be plenty, just in case I realize later I need one for some reason. The next thing that I'll bring, I just talked about measuring to make sure that the sleeve is the right length or it matches the other sleeve I've already made. For that, I'll need some sort of tape measure or ruler. I like tape measures because they are small and compact. With a ruler, even if it's plastic, I feel like if I put too much pressure on it, if it's in the wrong bag, I could snap it. I don't want to have a broken tool. So I'm going to bring a tape measure. This is a really pretty tape measure that I got in a bookshop once. and it's just normal inches on one side, centimeters on the reverse, and it coils back up on its own with the push of a button. Okay, let's see. I think this is just about everything I need. The last thing I can think of that I might want with me when working a sweater project is barber cord or stitch saver. If you haven't seen stitch saver before, it comes from several different brands. Typically they are silicone tubes that are meant to hold your stitches. So you could hold stitches for a sleeve, you could hold part of a glove or sock when you're working another portion, or for the case of a sweater, I'm going to use them to slide all of the stitches onto and then try the sweater on. So that's my favorite way to make any sort of garment. If you can, slide your stitches onto scrap yarn or a stitch saver, and then you can actually try on the hat, the sock, the glove, the sweater, whatever it is, to make sure you're happy with the length, the circumference, etc. So I'm going to bring just a little parcel of stitch saver with me. I have some that live in tins. I could also just bring a singular scrap of it, but I've got them in the tin, so I'll bring this whole thing along. I think that's everything I'll need for this project. Of course, I have a copy of the pattern. Sometimes I print my patterns, other times I just keep them on my phone or my iPad if I don't need to look at them as often. So now to pack all of these things up, I love to use some sort of zip pouch to keep things organized. So I have these zip pouches from the Container Store. They are the Marie Kondo brand. And I'm going to start putting my notions in first. And this might seem a little messy to some people out there. Because I don't have a ton of stuff I'm taking for this project, I think I'll be able to sift through this pretty easily. But if you are even more organized, you might like using smaller pouches or a fixed container where you can have things more easily organized in their specific places. But for me, having some sort of pouch is a good start. After that, I've got my spare set of needles. I should throw those in there as well. And then the rest is already attached to my project. I've got the needles that are in the sleeve and my one ball of yarn. So at this point, I would fold up the sweater with the needles in it, take my ball of yarn and tuck it in safely so it's not rolling around in whatever bag I take, and then I'm going to throw all of this into some sort of project bag. I have a simple tote here that I'll take with me on this trip. And for this step, usually I like to use a zip bag. So if I have a tote that has a zipper closure or a drawstring closure, I like that for the flight because I know that things aren't going to tumble out of it. So this is one way I could pack my things and have everything needed for my project in one fairly gathered place. All of this could go into a backpack. It could sit at the top of my suitcase, my carry-on suitcase, so that once I'm through security, I can open up the suitcase and then carry this bag with me. Or if you have a free hand, this could just go with you through the airport and through security on its own. So now a few words, a few suggestions about specifically going through the security checkpoint. In my experience in the last year to 2 years of flying, depending on what security lane you go through, the rules might be different. Not the rules of what you can have, but the rules of how you should present things, how you should run them through the scanners. So the best possible thing to do is just to have your wits about you and to listen when it's time for you to go through security. Depending on whether or not you have pre-check, you might not have to take off shoes, you might not have to take liquids or electronics out of your bag, but for crafting supplies, as far as I know, there's no extra rule that your crafting supplies should come out of your bag. So I think to get them through in an unassuming way, you should just have them packed with the rest of your things. So I would typically have my project bag tucked away in a backpack or tucked away in a suitcase so that when it goes through the scanner, They might see the small pair of scissors, they might see the knitting needles, and potentially they'll pull that bag to the side to look through it with me, but typically there are no questions asked in my experience. The bag goes right through, I grab my bag, and I go on my way. If they pull your bag aside and go through it with you, the best possible thing you can do is just be prepared to explain to them what each tool is for and why you have it. So if they look in your bag and they want to know, what is this? And they pull out your crochet hook, you should be prepared to tell them it's a crochet hook. And ideally, you'll have a project in progress in the bag so you can show them. It goes with this project. I'm crocheting, I'm taking this with me for my trip. And that's a normal answer that shouldn't get any special questions asked. I think if you were to only take supplies, if you were to take a ball of yarn, a crochet hook, a pair of scissors, and nothing to show, nothing crafted already, they might have more questions. They might just think you're taking a random sharp object when really you're taking a crochet hook. So that's why I'm taking a sweater that is already mostly knit. And if I had chosen another project that was just begun, I would still have some sort of fabric, something to show them attached to the needles or nearby my hook to show them it's just crochet or it's just knitting. Same with the scissors. I think keeping them in with your notions, with your supplies, will show this is just an item I'm using to aid in my crafting. Worst case scenario is that somebody has a problem with the things you're bringing through and they want to confiscate it. Again, as I said before, if somebody wants to start a fight and take your supplies, unfortunately, there's not much you can do. I think if I were in that situation and somebody told me I couldn't have my knitting needles, if they were in a project, I would pull the needles out of the project, I would give them the needles, but I would take the project with me. I wouldn't want to give them my yarn or give them my sweater, my shawl, whatever I'm working on. It would be sad. So a tip for that, if you're going somewhere and you're really nervous, you're really worried that they're going to take some of your supplies, and wherever you're going, whatever your destination is, requires that you have your craft with you, take it in your checked bag. If you are anxious, if you have heard rumors that the agents at your airport are really strict about these things, that they take things even when they're supposed to be allowed, then you could do that for peace of mind. You could pack your items in your checked bag. Of course, that means you can't work on it in the airport, you can't work on it on the plane, but it's going to guarantee that it gets to your destination. But we looked at the rules together. If you're flying in the US, you're going through a TSA checkpoint, and it says in black and white on the website, crochet hooks, knitting needles, scissors, they're allowed. So I think having your things organized in a way that shows what they do, what their purpose is the best way to go about making your way through security. Another tip I've heard, I've never had to do this, but I hear people recommend it. Some people have said this has saved them on international trips where they're really unsure of what the rules might be, flying with a different carrier or going through a different airport. They bring a self-addressed envelope. So they'll have some sort of padded mailer that's with them in their luggage, in their carry-on, and they're prepared to take their project, take their needles, their hooks, whatever it is, and if they're told that they cannot take them on the plane, they will put them in the prepaid envelope, seal it up, leave the security line, and drop it off in a UPS, a FedEx, whatever sort of mail service they want to use. They'll drop off their package so that it can get mailed back to their home. Of course, that means they're not going to be able to craft on their trip, but people do that as a last resort. I've never done that, but maybe I will one day. Maybe if I'm traveling somewhere where I just can't find an answer and I doubt that I could get through security with the things I need, then I might have that ready just in case. All right, Big Cat wandered into the room as I'm filming, and that means he gets to say hello. Do you have anything to say to the people, Big Cat? Big Cat is a pretty good traveler. He's an old cat. He's something like 18 years old now, and he's in pretty good health. He's strong, he's limber, he's friendly as ever, and he's gone on a lot of trips. He's never flown, but he's been on road trips before. And when he goes on road trips, he's very well behaved. He gets to roam around the back portion of the car, and he loves looking out the window. He likes talking to us, and I think he enjoys seeing new places. So that's Big Cat. I hope you've enjoyed the bonus of seeing him today. Let me show you one more thing I do just as an added step to make sure I'm able to get through security without any fuss. When I travel, I often bring this hard suitcase with me. It's a little steamer trunk, and I'll bring it with me because it's hard cased. It's not anything that could get crushed or kicked around. So I'll keep things like a camera, I'll keep my knitting needles, my project, scissors, anything sharp in this case to make sure that they stay protected and that anything else outside of the case stays protected. If you have scissors, if you have really sharp or really thin needles, small sizes of things, they might puncture through your bag if you have a very soft, thin tote or backpack or purse. So using something like this makes me feel at ease that all of my tools, all of my notions are going to be safely encased. So I'll use this bag and I'll put things like my notions pouch that's got scissors, everything else I need, my extra needles in the bottom. And then on top of that, I'll put my actual work. Then there's still room in this case for more. I might put, like I said, a camera if I need to film while I travel. I'll put that in here. Maybe I'll put my battery packs, other things that have to be packed in a careful way. And then I'll go ahead and put anything else I know I need for the actual flight in here. I'll put my headphones, my phone charger, my iPad if I'm reading my project pattern from an iPad. I'll put everything in here. That way I can seal it up, latch it closed, and then I'm ready to take this case, run it through the scanners, hopefully no issues, but if there are any questions, everything's already in one place. I can easily show them my project, my tools, explain why I have it packed the way I do. Hopefully no issues there. And then when I'm on the plane, my larger suitcase or backpack, whatever I have as a carry-on, can go above me, and this can stay in my lap, and then when it's time to take off, it'll go under the seat in front of me. I think it's great to be prepared. I think it's great to think through exactly what you'll need and to try to set yourself up for success. So you can do that both in the way you pack things, but also in choosing what you'll bring. You want to bring a project that you can get through confidently. You don't want to bring something that you might make a lot of mistakes on. If you make mistakes in the first 10 minutes of your flight, then you might be stuck for the remainder of the flight without a project because you don't want to move forward until you've found a solution for your mistakes or errors. So I think it's great to bring something you're familiar with, to bring something you enjoy making, something that's going to keep you calm and relaxed for the duration of your flight. And then there are a lot of benefits. Once you're on the plane, you might strike up a conversation with your neighbor, you might run into other crafters. I know for me, it makes me a lot happier to have my knitting or crochet with me when I'm somewhere stressful like a crowded, packed airplane. So if you're a crafter who travels, if you're someone who likes to fly with your knitting, with your crochet, let me know in the comments. Have you had nightmare horror stories, or have you figured out exactly what you need to do and how you need to pack to successfully get through security every time? To sum up everything I've said through this rambling video, I'm going to give you my top 3 pointers for how to pack and my top 3 pointers for what to do in a worst case scenario. The number 1 tip for packing and preparing for your trip is to do your research. If you're flying in the United States, you're going through a TSA checkpoint, and I've gone through all of those current rules here. But if you're flying in another country or with another travel entity, do your research. Type into Google the name of the travel entity and a question. Are knitting needles allowed? Are scissors allowed? And I bet it will take you to their current rules and regulations. You could be really smart by printing those out and keeping them along with your crafting supplies in the suitcase in case you get someone who is new to their job in the screening process. It might help to have things in black and white with your crafting supplies. It also might not help. They might not want to hear your reminder of what the rules really are, but it could be helpful. Number 2 for preparing for your trip. Go through a checklist and make sure you have everything you need. Make sure you have all of the needle sizes called for your pattern. Make sure you have the exact type and number of stitch markers needed. Make sure you have other tools like a tape measure, a darning needle, a cable needle. Who knows what you need? And for the yarn, if your yarn comes hanked and needs to be wound, make sure you have the right amount of yarn already wound and ready for all of the crafting you'll do on your trip. And tip number 3 is be mindful of the way you pack and assemble things. Make sure that anything sharp is encased. It's not just rolling around in a suitcase or sticking out freely. Make sure your hooks, your needles, and your scissors are all wrapped up or contained in some sort of container. That could be a pouch, it could be a little box, it could be a notions bag, anything like that. And make sure that everything is gathered in the same place. If possible, take a project that's already in progress with the needles or hook attached to it. I think all of that is more helpful for any sort of security agent when they are looking at your bag and deciding whether or not those items are safe for flight. Now for the top 3 tips of worst case scenario. The number 1 tip for a worst case scenario is pack a duplicate of whatever you need in your checked bag. If I'm going on a trip and I'm unsure of the rules or I'm just nervous about making it through security, I'll probably have an extra set of needles or hooks in the exact sizes I need in my checked bag. Yes, this means potentially buying a duplicate set, but if you're going somewhere for a long time or it's just really important to you that you have all of your supplies, then it might be worth it to you. Tip number 2 for worst case scenario, if something is taken away in security, whether it's your needles, your hook, your scissors, your tape measure, do some research and see if your destination has stores that will carry the supplies you might need. So look to see if there's a local yarn shop, if there are big box stores, or some place to get your hands on replacements if it's a worst case scenario and some of those things are confiscated as you depart for your travel. And the 3rd tip for worst case scenarios is to have a prepaid envelope ready to send back home. So I've never done this, I've never had anything taken from me, but I've heard it from a lot of experienced crafters and travelers, and it's not a bad idea. So make sure you have whatever size mailer envelope you need with enough postage for the total weight you might be packing in it, and go ahead and have that stamped and addressed just in case somebody puts up a fight when you're going through security and tells you that you can't take your items through. In that worst case scenario, you could pack up the things that you aren't allowed to take with you, seal them up, leave the security line, and drop them off at some sort of drop point. And hopefully that will give you a little bit of peace of mind that you don't have to part with those items forever. I think that's everything I wanted to mention for this video. If you're here watching this video, you might have already seen my flying anecdotes, my stories of some fun flying experiences and some weird, less than fun flying experiences. If you haven't seen that video already, go check it out. I'll have it linked in the description box below. And check into the comments. Let me know where you travel, what you like to bring, and if you have a method or process that differs from what I've talked through today. I'd love to learn from you and hear some of your own stories. So thanks for being here with me on the channel. Thanks for being part of my community. I really appreciate any time you choose to watch any of my videos. So happy knitting, happy crocheting, happy crafting to you, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.